Now I'm going to talk about my glass musical instruments. Making glass instruments is an important part of my art practice. I have a background as a musician, and that's what I did before I started working with glass. And when I began working with glass, I really wanted to find a way to merge my two passions, which are glass and music. I think that glass has a tremendous capacity to create sound and vibration, and I love to experiment with different ways that glass can create noise and music and different kinds of sounds. This is one of my earliest trumpets. I make a lot of glass trumpets, and basically what I do here is I'll coil glass tubing up into a coil, add a bell on the end, and a mouthpiece. As you can see, I'm not really concerned with replicating, like making an actual realistic looking instrument out of glass. I'm a lot more interested in exploring absurdity and humor in these instruments and kind of pushing what kind of form the glass can take on and still create a noise. Here's what this one sounds like. I don't normally add a mouthpiece to the trumpet, and this one I did, but normally what I do is I'll just create a mouthpiece on the very end of the tube and fuse it so it's permanently connected. But this one, the mouthpiece removes, so it's easy to travel with. This is a glass flute, and as you can see, it's very simple. It's a tube that's about 3/4 of an inch in diameter, and I pop holes. I follow a pattern similar to most flutes to create a basic flute shape. And sometimes I'll do more fancy things with these, like sandblast them, do some cold working, but this is just the basic flute. And I'm not a professional flute player by any means, so an actual flute player can make this sound a lot better. This is a glass rain stick, and I learned how to make these by taking a class with Sally Prosh. Sally Prosh, if you don't know her, she's a master scientific glass blower and artist, and she creates glass musical instruments. And she was one of my first inspirations of how to make glass instruments. So here you can see there is a tube with ridges inside of a larger tube, and there are these little marbles on the inside. And this is using a scientific glass blowing technique. It's similar to a jacketed flask. And here's a simple one. This is a glass bell. And if you're familiar with scientific glass blowing techniques, it is a ring seal with a clapper on the inside of the tube. So it's pretty simple. This is a water hammer, and it's one of the most simple instruments, but it's one of my favorites actually. And it is water sealed inside of glass under a vacuum. And when you play it, it creates this noise. It sounds like something metallic is inside of the tube, but in reality, there's nothing in there but water, and that's the sound of the water hitting the glass without any air cushion inside. So this, to make this, I blew the form, left the end open up here, and after filling it with water, I hooked it up to a vacuum pump to evacuate the air, and then sealed it off. So that's how you make a water hammer, and they're very delicate because it's under a lot of pressure, so you just have to be very careful with them. This is one of my more recent trumpets, and it's a trumpet that wraps around my head when I play it, like this. This actually very comfortable, and this way you can be like a one-man marching band and you don't even have to hold your instrument because it just rests on your shoulder. So it's very convenient. Although you do have to be careful if there's anything on the ceiling above you, you can't go under a really like low door frame or else you might hit it. So it extends your body in the upward fashion. This is one of my most weird instruments, and it is a trumpet that makes you go deaf when you play it. So we have a bell at the top and a mouthpiece here, and then there's a second bell here that lines up against the player's ear. So when you play it, it looks something like this. And it actually makes my voice very loud in my ear when I talk into it. And you can imagine when I play it, it would amplify into my right ear and give me hearing damage. And I actually did try it one time when I had finished making it late at night because I was very curious to see if it worked. And it works, and I do regret it because I didn't get the hearing fully restored in my right ear for several weeks. So it's part of this interest that I have in creating instruments for the body that both help and hinder you at the same time. But rest assured, I will not be playing this again anytime soon. So I'm going to demonstrate how to make panpipes, and panpipes are one of my favorite instruments because they're so easy to play. Anyone can play them. You don't have to have musical training, and they're pretty simple, but you can make them as complicated as you want to. I work a lot with borosilicate glass tubing, and I often have lots of small pieces of glass tubing lying around my studio after I work with the tubing. It gets pretty short to the point where it doesn't have a lot of use to me. And at that point, I like to turn it into panpipes because that's what it's perfect for. So if you have tubing lying around, you can test what note it's going to be just by covering the end with your thumb and playing it. And often I'll use a tuner online so I can double check the note. So that's an F. It's a C. And I'll show you how I tune the pipes, which is kind of a fun process. But we'll start by turning these into round bottoms. So I'm just closing all of these off. This is, I believe, 14mm standard wall tubing. And I like to work a lot with standard wall tubing because it doesn't crack very easily when you work with it, and you can get away with working with a piece and not having to throw it in the kiln that much when you're working with it. So we have F, G, and I want the last note to be a B, so let's go for that. Oh, there we go, a B. Just gonna close this. So if you want to change the pitch of the tube, you can make it a higher pitch by condensing the tube and making it shorter, which raises the pitch. If you want to make the pitch lower, you can puff it out, which makes the tube longer and that lowers the note. So here, we can make it higher by condensing it down. I'm just thickening up the bottom here a little bit. So that raised the pitch by a whole half step. And it's a very simple way to change the pitch. So I have 3 notes here. And that's a pretty nice arpeggio, so I'm gonna work with these. So what I'm gonna do is lay the tubing in a line like that. And then I get a Sharpie marker and I just mark where I want the connections to be. So I'm gonna mark it in 2 places. And that's gonna help me know where I'm gonna put everything. So I'm going to start by placing a little bit of glass on the largest tube and puffing it out. Because anytime you attach tubing to solid glass, there's a lot of stress there. So this is going to help us not have that much stress. It's very important to do this step before you begin to attach. So now I'm going to add some glass to the second tube. And then we'll add some solid bridging. And connect the 2 pieces together. Now we're going to add some bridging on the outside more as a decoration. So right where I have the Sharpie markers, I'm going to do the same step where I add a little bit of solid glass. And then we'll add some connections. So I'm just smoothing this area out and make it look really pleasing. And this is a really simple version of a panpipe, but you can get as complex with this as you want to. You can add decorations of any kind, or you could color it, sandblast it, cold work it, get as complicated as you want. But I like this demo because it's good for people who've never worked with tubing before, and also people who are more advanced, and you can sort of do a range of different things with this simple technique. And then I'll add some on this one. So there's a lot of ways you can decorate these, basically any way you can imagine. The panpipe is a blank canvas for your creativity. But this one I'm going to decorate with some implosion marbles. I'm going to put them on the bridging section. So I'm going to make a couple of those right now. I'm using 8mm rod, and I'm just going to keep these small so I'm not working really with giant rod. And I'm going to use some frit, which I have in a little dish. This is double amber purple frit. Going into the frit, I'm using a high oxygen flame, because that's what you have to do when you work with amber purple. I'm heating the disc until it turns into a ball, using gravity to turn the disc into a ball, and doing that will envelop the color into the clear and create the implosion. And I'm repeatedly flattening out on my graphite, which is on the table, to do the implosion process. So this is amber purple, so it's a striking color, and so what I want to do is let this cool down entirely before I punty it, and that will allow the striking color to go through the phase that's necessary for it to be the color that I want it to be. If I don't let it cool down all the way and I punty it and heat it up again too early, it will create a hazy color that is not desirable. So the way that I can tell that it is cool enough is I actually hold it underneath the table where it's dark, and if it's glowing at all, it's too soon for me to punty, it's too soon for me to reheat it. So that's how I check. All right, it's ready. Round it into a small marble. And as it's cooling, the color is starting to appear. I'm going to punty to the front so it's ready to attach. And leave a little small bit of glass on the end as the attachment point. So I'm going to let this hang out in the kiln for a little bit because it's an implosion, so there's a lot of stress. So I'm just going to give it a few minutes to chill in the kiln. I'm going to use Blue Moon, which is a darker color, so I'm going to switch mine to my dark glasses. Dip it in the frit, melt the frit inside, hang it down in the flame, turn the disc into a ball, and repeatedly do that process. A basic compression implosion. Because this isn't a striking color, I'm not going to wait for it to cool down all the way because it doesn't make a difference for Blue Moon. Puntying to the top, and again, leaving a little bit of glass at the bottom for a connection point. And a little bit more, actually. All right, now I'm going to let that hang out in the kiln for a few minutes as well. All right, so the biggest implosion has had some time in the kiln, so now I'm going to attach it. Now I'm going to attach the middle implosion. Now I'm going to put on the last one. All right, let's let that cool down for a minute. All right, and here is our finished piece with the implosion marbles in between the bridges of the panpipe. Thanks for watching.